So how do we convert some drawn text that looks like this into points that look like this? Well, what we need to do is see what is within P5. And again, it's all to do with typography. So I'm just going to quickly click typography. So in here, we have some attributes like align and size and width, things that we've been actually using quite a lot. We've got load font, text and text font. And then we have this thing called P5.font. So if I click this, what happens? Well, in here, it gives us a base class for font handling. Now, under the hood, this is used in a lot of different instances, but if you scroll further down, it also has some methods in here as well, some other things that we can actually use, things like text bounds, so we can draw a box around a shape, and we also have textToPoints. So here what we can do is really start to play with some of the typography. And in here, it tells you how it works. So here is an example, and what we want further down is this wants to give us back a list of points or an array of points following the path for some specified text. So basically, we can put some text in at certain points and a font size, and it will give us back a list of points. So how do we actually work with this? Instead of us drawing the text by default, instead what we're going to do is take the text, turn it into some points, and then draw those points instead. So to do that, we're going to go back to our project, and we're going to use this idea of textToPoints. So where do we want to do this? Well, I want to set this up and then later on draw the points. So because I want to set it up and then later draw the points, what I'm going to do is let there be an area to save this to. So I'm going to let there be points, all of the points for this certain text that we're going to write. So in our setup, what I want there to be is points is going to be equal to the thing that we've got in P5, textToPoints. So what we can do here, how does it actually work? So we need to find the font, which has already been done. We've loaded the font in, also called Inconsolato. And then on that font, we can turn it into a textToPoints. So on the font.textToPoints, this is what we want to do first. On this font, we want to do text to with a capital T, points with a capital P. And then in brackets, we're going to run this code. What code do we want to run? Well, in here, it gives us some detail. It says the text, the line of text it needs to be, an X and Y coordinates, and a font size. Now, one of the downsides is we can't use things like text align here. We have to kind of like work it out piece by piece. So for now, we'll just kind of see how it looks and then kind of work with it. So what we're going to say is the text that we want to write in quotes is going to be Danny Lewis. The next thing we want to do, comma, is position it. So here it expects an X and a Y coordinate. So the X for now, I'm just going to make it 100, 100. What is the font size is the next question. There it is. So next, I want to put in how big it is. In my final one, it's going to actually be 180. We'll kind of move it around if we need to. And then there's other options that we can put in here. How do we put some options in as an object? Well, an object just looks like curly brackets. So comma, curly brackets means do this. And again, whenever I have curly brackets, I like to open them up. There we go. So there's two things that we can put inside here. There is a sample factor and a simplify threshold. The default for this is 0.1. The default for this is 0. We'll add both so we can play around with them. And we could even add a slider later on as well. So the sample factor by default is 0.1. Let's put that one in. Sample factor and then 0.1, comma, and then the other one in here is going to be simplify threshold. Simplify threshold. Did I spell that correctly? I think I did. By default, this is 0. Let's just double check. Yep. So what I've got back here on points is a list of points. What I can do in draw is draw these points later on. And at the moment, if we look at the code, it just has this text in place. So what we want to do in draw is basically list over each individual point and basically draw it. So each point has an X and a Y in there. So what do we need to do? So in draw, I'm going to basically get rid of our text, which we currently have. So this text font and this text, we're going to get rid. So what do we want to do instead? So this is a list of points. we want to go over each point and give it a color and a position. So for these points, we want to go over and add it for each individual one. We don't know how many there is. There's no point doing a for loop here because we could be 20 points, it could be 200. We just don't know. So instead, what I'm going to do is my points, I'm going to add to my points. I'm going to do something on points for each. So this is similar to what we did in the last project where we had a H1 tag and a H2 tag. We don't know how many H1 tags that there could have been. Here we don't know how many points there could have been, so we're going to loop over them one by one. So for each, we're going to do something. What do we want to do? Well, for each point, we want to do some code. We're going to do an arrow and then some curly brackets. Now points is from what I put up here, and I've made it equal to this. This point is something, again, I've named for each individual point. I'm going to open this up, and what does each individual point have? Well, if we remember from here, we can see it returns a list of points. Each of these points has an X and Y. So what do we want to draw first of all? Well, for now, I'm just going to draw each individual circle. Now here, how do we draw a circle? Again, we have to go back to our reference guide. How do we draw even shapes? So shape might be one place to look. Shape, there's things like, unsurprisingly, circle. So here what we're going to do is draw a circle. Like we could make this an ellipse maybe, so we can have two different directions. So give it a kind of a bit more detail on the width and height. I like to do both so I have a bit more control, just personal preference. So here what I'm going to do for each point is I'm going to draw a circle. The circle, actually let's use circle, why not, right? Instead of ellipse, we might as well use circle. So here for each bit of the circle, we're going to use the points X and the points Y. And how big is this circle? For now, we're just going to make it 5. So now, hopefully, what we see on the page is something that looks like this. Now, it's not in the right position yet, and we might want to move it around, and we might want to give it a color. How do we give it a color and get rid of this stroke from the edge? Well, first thing we're going to do is before this loop, all of them are the same color. So we're going to say the fill for anything below this is going to be this yellow color. So in quotes, I'm going to pick from the style this color here. So there it is, hash that. So now what we should see, the inside being the right yellow color, but we don't want any kind of outline to this. So we're going to say no stroke and then round brackets. And again, this is just from the reference guide. I can go to reference and see how we give things color. In here, color has things like fill, no fill, stroke, and stroke as well. So now what we should see is something that looks like this. So I can basically put this in the right place. Again, I kind of want to move it down the page a little bit more. How do I even think about doing that? Well, again, I just need to kind of move it around the page. And to move it around the page, I'm just going to change the X and Y coordinates in my text to fonts. So the final one that works pretty well is 130. And the one that I've got written down is 330 as well. So 130, 330, puts it in the middle of the page. So now we've basically drawn all of the points that we can see. And we can change some of these numbers if we want as well. So for instance, if you remember from back when we did the textToPoints, I scrolled down into my typography area, clicked on p5.font, I can do textToPoints. And in here, I can change these two things like sample factor and simplified threshold. The higher values yield more points. So the default is 0.1. If we start to increase that, there'll be more points. So 0.2 gives us more points. If we make it something like 0.5, it might actually just draw out a solid line of what we expect. So this is just a list of points. Again, if I make that circle a little bit smaller, maybe 1, this has an outline of points, which I can kind of see. It's not quite a solid line, but I have this kind of control now. So again, if I just make this 5 for the circle and make this back to 1, what does simplified threshold do? So here I've got it like that. If I change this number to, let's say 1, let's try 1, what we'll get is something that looks like this. Now what is going on here? Well, maybe it's too much. Maybe we'll do 0.1 as well, see what happens there. And what is actually happening is it's the threshold between different things is kind of not filling in the straight lines. You can see it's kind of doing the curves, but it's only not doing the straight lines. It's only if we make this 0 is we add a point. So it's only if we want no straight lines, if we want to increase simplify threshold. So here what we have is something that works and we've kind of drawn as we want. So next, what do we want to do? We want to draw some lines between each one. I'll talk about that in the next video.